I have a challenge.
Don't worry, take your time. I will.
Yeah, thank you.
So don't worry, I will take the opportunity to just express my question and leave it there for Bill, so that he might later on, and I think that everyone that is connected, which is I think that the four of you connected to the H3 University, or H3 Uni initiative. And this is about new research that I was reading this week on the latest issue of New Scientist, which is a new understanding. It's a new theory about the potential function of dreams for human well-being. So the former theory, the received theory, is that dreams were a condition that allow the memories to kind of be selected and accommodated neurologically. So that this was kind of a cleaning up of the daily experience. But now the new function that is very interesting with a very substantial behavioral and neurological research base is looking at the possibility that that beyond memory cleaning up, so to speak, that dreams serve a function of inducing variability, noise, to explore alternatives that have not actually been experienced, so that the balance of experience that is achieved through memory is also shaken up into alternative possibilities. And the theory has extrapolations which are very interesting for the function as well of arts and fiction in everyday life. So as to how this introduce variability beyond what has been experienced. So there has been a lot of discussion about these issues as well regarding the discourses, alternative discourses for the Anthropocene, in the sense that we have also to reimagine the way that we conceive our own challenges and crises. So I'll leave it there. We can come back to that. But how are you doing, Nico?
It worked for a moment.
Okay.
Now I have stopped screen share, but I will try again.
Okay. Otherwise, if you want to go through it, you describe the content and you may just talk about this. Or shall we shift order and give the floor now to Anthony?
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea, actually.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
So
I stop.
yes, while you find your way. Okay. So let me introduce our fourth speaker, Anthony Hodgson. He is a founding trustee of H3 Uni, and we hopefully will learn more about this wonderful initiative, which is described as Towards a University of the Third Horizon, an initiative born out of the recognition that most higher education does not address the huge shift in the skills of collaboration and resilient thinking that are needed to successfully navigate global existential risks. He has developed new methods of participative repatterning of shared thinking in groups. He is a founder member of the International Futures Forum think tank, working especially on transformative innovation and new methods of cooperation to match the needs of the Anthropocene. Anthony, so pleased to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Good to be here. Well, I'd like to kick off from your initial trigger question about the main drivers of knowledge in the Anthropocene. And I think you'll see, although I come at it from a slightly different angle, this will resonate with what Ioan and Bill have been introducing. So now you've heard the three horizons framing from Bill. I can make the proposition that if we're going to look at the main drivers for the Anthropocene, we have to frame them in the three horizons, and therefore this indicates there are three kinds of driver that it's important we don't muddle up. So the obvious driver, and the one which is normally present in even forecasting kind of work and anticipation, is the momentum of current knowledge systems. But Ioan made the point when he started off, when he was on his satellite looking down on the planet and seeing all this activity, huge amounts of knowledge generation, but in what horizon is that taking place? What are the deep assumption sets and belief systems which are underpinning that knowledge? And it's not that they're not relevant. Clearly, the last 300 years of science and technology progress are entirely non-trivial, but perhaps they've reached a limit which is now has to be transgressed to match the challenges of the Anthropocene. So another framing of drivers is the increasing dissatisfaction with the practical performance and ethical orientation outside. It's got uncoupled from meaning and significance. And of course, in an age of huge amplification of social media, we're all occupied with the fact-checking, even three horizons. The emergent horizon 2 is the new patterns of production of new forms, new hybrid forms of knowledge that perhaps are best represented by a word that Ioan used of wisdom. So relating this to knowledge cities, it struck me that that my question is how far cities and institutions will respond to the existential challenges of the Anthropocene and enable a paradigm shift of the type that was indicated in the paper, which summed up essentially the conclusions that there's a need for much more innovation in this field around further advances in transdisciplinary and post-disciplinary methodologies. I remember being struck as a young undergraduate coming across a book on the idea of the university by Lord Lindsay, who was the founder of Keele University, saying the Lord in his wisdom did not divide the universe into faculties. And that stuck with me ever since. Secondly, what is needed to scale the innovation so these small pockets of the future can come into the present and begin to become the new system. And of course, the problem then is how will the new infrastructure, whatever it turns out to be, emerge from the transformation of the existing? And of course, that comes back to Bill's point about the inner, that means we, the people, so to speak, are required to exercise much greater ingenuity and boldness in overcoming resistance to this change, which we can see is, in a sense, escalating, perhaps, hopefully, as a kind of last brushing of its tail. And so So there's philosophical as well as technical knowledge to be done around what we mean by a knowledge system. So I pictured in my imagination that that something would happen in the discussion of knowledge cities over the next 2 or 3 years that would perhaps begin to articulate different categories of knowledge in a new way, as well as the capitals and the indicators. So that's my first shot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. And let's now go back to Nico. Nico, are you set?
I hope so.
Okay, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, let's see how this goes.
May I take the opportunity to invite those participating on the Blue session to post their comments or questions on the chat so that we start considering them. Go ahead, Nico, please.
Yes, thank you, Javier. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Javier?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Great. So, thank you. Sorry for the delays and the problems. We need to change the way we use and produce knowledge.
Recording is on.
20 years ago around user innovation and urban living, so bringing in consumers into product innovation, for example. But in the last 10, 15 years, they have been heavily applied to sustainability challenges. And they also are currently moving from a more global north focus to a more appearing in the global south too. So, and that, why can I say that? That there is this trend. We have researched what is actually written on these cases of these examples, and there's a lot more written in the last 20 years, and a lot more cases reported. So that you can see here in the curves that there are more peer-reviewed publications coming out on the different forms of labs in the real world. So there actually is something going on, which is interesting. And why is this interesting? What are these cases standing for? And here I draw on my own experience from southern Germany, where we accompanied 14 real-world labs, bigger projects, the areas urban planning, sustainable energy, local regional development, but also migration, refugees, and education. And the interesting thing for me is that those labs are working differently with knowledge. They aim to contribute to societal change on the one hand, and to understand it at the same time. So they have a transformational intent, which they are based on, not just understanding, but actually contributing to change with what they are doing. They are based on co-creative transdisciplinary processes, so they value different forms of knowledge from, for example, society and research, and integrating this. They include experimental testing of solutions, so they connect research and practice, or knowledge and action in the way that they are working. And it's still kind of new, and stakes are high around many of the issues. So to create a safe space for joint learning is actually central to these real-world labs. So that's why I think they are good examples of the second horizon initiatives that we are looking for. I bring one concrete case, which is the Future City Lab from Stuttgart. We have a lab on sustainable mobility culture, which is to explore visions and practices of sustainable mobility, using the city of Stuttgart and the region as a real-world experimental platform, having transdisciplinary processes of, on the one hand, data generation, but also the development of scenarios and pilot projects at its heart. And there are several experiments that this lab has been actually implementing, which is, for example, having parklets, which is replacing parking areas with cafes, with cinemas, with other temporary usage forms. They have an app which incentivizes cycling, actually by giving you gifts for the good that you do to the city by cycling and not taking the car. They are having art galleries in places where normally people are just rushing by in public staircases that are connecting the different parts of the city. They use citizen science or participate in citizen science to generate data on the air quality, and particularly the pollution that is there in the city. And that is part of a larger European network of citizen science around air data. They do something which is called the critical mass initiative, where it's about having so many bicycles on the street that there's no more space for cars. That is, I must admit, very kind of alternative mobility oriented, but Stuttgart is serving there, or let's say allowing for a new way of thinking. So it's actually quite radical. Of course, that would look different in the place where you are from. So that's why my last point is that the process, they start from identifying key players, connecting to that sorts of actors who are allowed to propose transformative design workshop, where they together decided on what should be the goals and the success measures of the experiments that they selected. So what is success was jointly defined, as well as the complete process of practice different experiments. Then there were the experiments I just introduced, the different types of interventions in transport. And then they had a joint reflection workshop in the end, where both societal and scientific actors were bringing their own evaluation of was this successful, what was successful and what not in this experiment to the table, and then they were together generating recommendations for policy and administration. So actually, for me, quite interesting ways of together producing knowledge and putting it to use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nico. And after this first round of answers from our speakers, let me pose a second question. Now, a little bit more on the pragmatic side and immediate challenges. We have this huge gap between the level of existential threat that is unprecedented to mankind, the level of risk for the biosphere to become dysfunctional. It has already been for so many of our of other creatures, and now it's also looking like this for many others, including us, humans. So we have this huge challenge, unprecedented challenge that perhaps most of us don't even realize still the size of it, the scale of it. And on the other hand, we have this establishment of knowledge systems that were created for the altogether different circumstance of the Holocene. So, given this huge gap, and thinking in terms of this framework of the different horizons. How do you envisage the most immediate, the most effective, the most urgent lines of action that can be promoted from different platforms at different levels? I mean, from the bottom up and at the federal, at the national level and regional level in Europe, for example, or after the outcomes of the elections in the US, and the political circumstance of the moment, how this enables or restricts the most urgent lines of actions in your perspective. So I will go through the same order, and of course, unless some of you wants to speak first. So Ioan, is it okay for you to reply first?
Yeah, I'm happy to reply. So I mean, that's a challenging question, and I'm not sure we know the exact answers to that at this stage. But what it comes to mind is, you know, what we were really trying to focus on in the piece of work we did, which was really key, which was looking at the knowledge systems, not just the methods of knowledge production that we've got. There are lots and lots of examples, and very nicely articulated by Nico, of lots of really innovative ways of dealing with these things, but the systems are just not set up to do that. And so I struggle with that in the sense that, how do I support you know, the university that I'm in and my colleagues to help make the shifts into being 10% of that, it would make a massive, massive difference. So the potential is really there. But then you have to start asking questions, well, why is it that it's taking so long to respond to that? Why is it such that, you know, so much of our activities are still focused on the production around it? But the conclusion that I've come to really is that these institutions, they've built over 300, 400, 500 years of advancement of a particular form of ways of thinking, and that's so deeply embedded in our institutions, so deeply embedded, and it leads to all our disciplinary structures and those sorts of things that are part of the inhibitors of this possibility and unleashing of this potential. And so that's really key. It's this very deeply ingrained understanding, particular understanding of what knowledge and knowing is, that is a real restriction to that. And so then, in answer to your question, well, what can we do? Well, you just come back to the inevitability of the change. At some point, it's going to have to change, right? At some point, it will. And I think even just before this call, we were saying, well, there's Bill and I were sort of had a quick exchange, and we were saying, the feeling that we're reaching a tipping point. Reaching a tipping point by which there could be quite rapid shifts in reputational shifts in universities, not just about their climate credentials, but also in their relevance as a university for the public good. And I'm starting to see that bubble up here everywhere now. You know, there's this real challenge of what the question, and that questioning of what makes a university for the public good. And renew that commitment. And then you have to ask, well, it's quite interesting because universities have lasted some for centuries. I think the oldest one is it Morocco, that's AD 900, something like that, when it was established. And so on the one hand, you have these really long-lasting institutions that have adapted. They've adapted in terms of how they've navigated some quite significant shifts in their knowledge focus and what they're doing, and yet, so some people say to me, well, of course, these have been around for a long time, they will persist. And I say, well, I'm not sure that's entirely true, right? Because I think you can't necessarily assume that, certainly in their current form, they're not going to persist, not with the levels of change that climate change and other existential threats bring. So, you know, I actually get hope from the fact that the things that we've created in the world, like climate change, which frankly have come from all the knowledge and technological scientific advances that we've actually had, they're the product of that in a way. So on the one hand, yes, we're facing these challenges, but they're the product of the systems we've got, and now those challenges are requiring us to do something different. So I bring hope from the inevitability of change. The question is whether we'll get there quick enough, and that's kind of the question you pose. And I don't have an answer to that yet, except that I do feel that we have that choice, and that choice is coming, and that the opportunities, again going back to the phenomenal potential that is there, that can shift, and that's going to require some major disruption, and that disruption is coming. So I think no easy answers there, of course, Javier, but I think it's that combination of inevitability of the transformations that society will go through, and either our universities and other institutions like them will go through it kicking and screaming, or or we will find a way to navigate it. Some may not, and that's the key challenge.
Wonderful. If only our universities acknowledge that to begin with, that would be a start. Bill, your take on this?
Yes, I think there are some really positive things that we can take on board about this. We've grown rather used to thinking of tipping points as rather dangerous negative things in the ecosystem of which we're part, and indeed that's the case, but we're less used to thinking of tipping points in our systems of life, our social systems and technology systems, that can also bring about incredibly rapid change. Now, I come out of the computer industry, where living with exponential change, the famous Moore's law of computers doubling in power every 18 months, was just the condition of life. And therefore the whole social pattern of the industry would change every 10 to 15 years, and it's still doing so. So the term that's being used a lot now in the COP team is to get on the S-curve. The human mind, it turns out, is just really bad. And then everyone was amazed at the speed at which solar technology came down in cost. Well, people who thought about exponentials weren't amazed. It was predictable 15 years ago that we would have the full grid capacity installations by now, and lo and behold, they're there. So we're talking about what does it take to get on the S-curve, and that means that once you're on that curve, then the scale up can happen really, really rapidly. So the other term we're using is then
Recording is on.
I hope you can see that.
Yeah.
It's the idea that what allows those investments to take place is that political ambition and policies can shape a really clear target that makes the investment possible for all the different players of business and finance to put in place the action to get the new technology or the new solution set going. And that then builds momentum and supports the market demand, and that of course then plays back in the commitment to that. Very early on in the solar transition, solar power in Germany was actually cheaper than solar power in Spain because there was political stability and certainty. So there's actually an advantage for business in having the appropriate long-term commitment from the political side, and that's supported by the now growing movements for change. I mean, we've even got teenagers in Australia lobbying the Australian government to change. So that gives the support for the policy making to set the long-term ambition. That supports the commitment of business to make those investments and the finance to come into place. So then this loop can get going and we can drive up that exponential process of change. If you look at Norway and the speed with which they've transitioned, the growth of the electric vehicle market is again an example where quite small comparative policies that shift the advantage to the new can really get you onto one of these new ambition loops and drive that S-curve along really fast. So I think this isn't going to answer all things. Not all things are about technology, but quite a lot of them are. And by encouraging the formation of these positive loops, instead of having the whole discussion about burden sharing, which is what it's been for the last 3 decades of the COP process, we need to move to opportunity sharing and say the more governments at more levels share commitments, share opportunities, the faster we drive down those learning curves and the more quickly we make the change. So leave behind those measures of efficiency from the first Horizon system, move to policies of effectiveness of change, and we can in fact make incredibly rapid progress.
Great. Excellent, Bill. I think we will come back to some of the ideas you just mentioned. And let's now give the opportunity to Nico to reply to this second question.
Yeah. Tony, you want to go first? Would that be okay?
Tony?
Or should I try?
Give it a go, Nico.
Okay, I give it a go. So I think I have two different angles here. One is I like the notion that Ioan mentioned that actually, yeah, change is inevitable. So, or rather say change already is happening. So the world has changed. Like look at the US election and the aftermath of what's going on there now. That has not been imaginable like 4 years ago. The world is already in change. And I think it's very powerful to acknowledge that the world is changing as a first step to be able to act on that. And that's something I think where when I speak personally as a researcher, I think many of my colleagues are just going to work and think, yeah, I'm going to do my own job every day. I have my life plans. I'm looking for stability and success. Yes, that's important, but at the same time, I think it's important to as well see, okay, the world has changed and universities are in a new role. And I personally, as a researcher, are in a new role, or I can take a new role in this. But the second thing is that I guess that's important to keep in mind to deal with these changes that are ongoing. And I think universities have kind of a double role in this, and that is a challenge. Be the neutral provider of knowledge and understanding where you can appeal to, where you can say, okay, I don't really know. We have so many different arguments. What is the truth? Be credible. That's one kind of function. And to think about in this new way, what are not only what is true, but also what is wise to do. I think that is important. So it's I think there's a huge tension that universities find themselves in, and not sad if that would go in the right direction. The second angle I have is actually the list from the paper, where there are lots of things set in there on what we think is what should happen. And I will not read that all, but there is a long list of things where we say, okay, things may change happen now. We would, for example, like to connect champions, innovative examples of doing things differently. We want to initiate broad societal engagement and knowledge production through creative critical mass participation.
Sorry, Nico,
yes.
Can you put that on the full screen mode?
I tried that.
Is that okay? Never mind. If it doesn't work, it's okay.
Okay.
Just
that's strange. Why didn't this work?
Never mind. You carry on.
Okay. So yeah, so I will keep it short, but this paper is also in the participants box, so to say. You can look at it. There's a long list of, I think, 12 different activities that we propose to make change happen now. Maybe take a look at that. So I will not speak much further. I will pass it on to Tony here.
Thank you, Nico, and let's remind our audience that the link to the actual paper, since it's an open publication, it's been reproduced in the program at the end of this first session. So I would strongly recommend everyone to go and actually go through the whole paper. Thank you, Nico. Yes, Tony, your comment.
Okay, well, you started your second challenge, Javier, with the tremendous gap, and that's from a normal perspective worrisome. From a three horizons perspective, to me, it's saying something very clear, which the movement to a horizon 3, which is compatible with humans living on the planet Earth, is a transformation. And by transformation, I mean that the pattern really does have to shift, as Bill was pointing out earlier. Now, for that pattern to change, there's a couple of stories. One story is a senior researcher connected with the Finnish government approaching me to see if I could convene a workshop on the theme of second order science and policy. Now, second order science is another way of talking about second order cybernetics. And the principle in cybernetics, which second order cybernetics, which makes it a fringe discipline that's not normally figured in university curricula, is that the knowledger, the knower, is acknowledged. The person in the knowledge is present, which of course is what was being discussed earlier, that the gap between the knower and the known needs to be closed. And what there's a paper on this which I can send you the reference to, but what came out of that, one of the things was that this second order science, which links, which bridges to the humanities as well, and so when you look at next generations of knowledge workers, there is hope if some of these new principles can be embedded into the curriculum. I mean, second order cybernetics has been a executive of a local authority, not quite a city, only about 350,000 souls in the district, approaching me. We
Recording is on.
That post-COVID is not returning to normal. We do have a climate emergency. We've even declared it in our public policies. But how do we approach that? We know that the old ways of, our bureaucracy don't work. So what I'd like to just share is a quick summarization of that. I've got to find, I think it's that one. So somebody let me know whether there's a picture of 3 circles on the screen.
It is.
Yeah, okay. So these are 3 domains which in our society historically are very poorly connected. I'll go through them. So the existential is what we've been alluding to all along in this conversation, the challenges the Anthropocene throws at us. And as Nico was reflecting on his colleagues, so many of us are still stuck in the life going on as usual assumption that the challenges are not really noticed. So awakening to the challenges is a key factor here. However, the challenges themselves are very much new territory. So the other problem is, as we move to the methodological, the methods that have generated our expertise and created experts have limited application to what's coming down the tracks from the future, because we've never been there before. Humanity's never been there before. So methods need to be much more open, creative, co-creative, and exploratory, without sacrificing the rigor that we've learnt from the more deterministic methodologies. Horizons is one example of a method to enter into this challenge. But then the third circle is the personal, is that the challenge of the existential and the methodological have huge implications for us as human individuals, that we can't separate the person from the knowledge process, as was alluded to in Ioan and Bill's talks particularly. And so areas of personal development, which have usually been in a separate domain, and which are even frowned upon in the methodological schools of deterministic science, become center stage. So the new education needs to bring these together as a synthesis between the person, the challenge, and the way they're approaching it. And all of those have to be learnt simultaneously. So the interesting thing is that this chief executive, and this is very congruent with what Bill was saying about the inner and the outer needing to come together. The inner and the outer come together through appropriate methods. So, so that's my first challenge. It's now premium.
Thank you so much, Tony. And building on that, let's regard the first two questions, the first two rounds, as the easy ones, because I want now to challenge you with a third question, third round, that to me would be a little bit more unsettling as someone involved into these issues. And it regards building upon two ideas that have been expressed by most of you. One is this idea of tipping points and the inevitability of change, and therefore the hope that can be drawn out of it, on the one hand. But on the other hand, what Tony just stressed, and some of you did before, about taking into account the knowledge agent, the knower. So my last challenge to you is, if we were, so to speak, to give the floor right now to the voice of the very young, not just the graduate students and people who are struggling now with their careers because of the pandemic's disruption and everything, but that somehow are still within the threshold of the current system, but the ones that right now have no choice, and they will have to face this inevitable change, most likely. I'm talking about the newborn and the very young. And if we were to give them, if we were to hear, listen to their voices, and if we were to imagine their experience as they get into the world and they discover a world that is most probably deteriorating in terms of the conditions for life. So, what is the reflection in this difficult balance between where we speak from and whom we speak to, and what kind of discourse we can articulate to address this new generation, and at the same time use that to shake our innermost motives and understandings as to how to tackle the very urgency of the climate emergency. So this would be, we have time for about 3 minutes each. So this would be like your last intervention. We follow the same order, if this is okay with you. If some of you wants to speak first, let me know. We are okay with the same order? Okay, let's go through it. Ioan, please. Your closing remarks.
I'm not sure I have a full answer. Not surprisingly, that's quite a hard question to throw at me. But at least if I try, then it'll give the chance for others to figure out their answers as well. So that's okay. I mean, the voices of the youth versus the wisdom of the old. I'm not sure that the old have the wisdom now, given the nature of the changes that are happening. But what I do know, and it's quite interesting, I'm 46 now. I used to be called the young, not too long ago, but I find myself entering the old, and I'm already looking at the world that the youth and my students have, which is completely different from a digital point of view, and it's a different way of thinking and operating, and so there is real opportunity and possibility in that in that new vigor and new way of thinking and understanding and relating to the world. But then, of course, I think about my grandparents and where they had and the wisdom that they brought, and that was valuable too. So I think it is that combination, of course. But then I also think that, you know, I used to hear this when I was a kid. Of change, we're all in it. We've got to figure it out, and we're all probably going to have to find some new ways of operating, thinking, and learning and knowing. Yeah, there's no easy answer to that one. I don't think it will be in combination and collaboration with that will be the answer, and that in itself is.
UK, which is the first country of the world to have actually passed the Future Generations Act, which
Recording is on.
Looking far enough out in terms of the children and the children's children. So the first answer is we need to commit to hearing those voices and to learning from the wisdom traditions that always took account of 7 generations. So we're beginning to look ourselves at how do we methodologically really respect that length of or view into the future. I take from the need of those young children the fact that actually valuing our world is something natural to us. You asked about art, and the response to beauty is a response to coherence. So one way to use art is to evoke that natural move towards the truth that art reveals to us is the truth of inner coherence to which we respond. And I think we can trust that. And young children have not yet had that overlaid with assumptions about how the world has to be. So one of the first things we do in 3 Horizons, this working from potential, is to say, what's the future abundance? Life is the configuration of abundance. So I think if we convene ourselves and allow ourselves to trust the move towards true abundance, and the abundance that is represented by everyone being a unique contributor to that future, and the energy and commitment that the young can bring, then the old have a role to play in supporting that and bringing what we can to bear on that. But I think trusting and nurturing the power of the young to be the force for change is what we want to do.
Absolutely, Bill. Thank you so much. Quite stimulating. And now, Nico, your last intervention, please.
Thanks, Javier. I actually like your challenges. They are pretty tough, unexpected. So that's good. I think like being a father of a still quite young boy, and also like being confronted with the challenge every day, I think what I would talk about principles of how to engage with the challenges, and try to make those principles feelable and understandable. And I think one of them is, as Ioan said, we are all in this together. So it's a relational quest that we have. It's about connecting, reaching out, and in that trying to be as true and authentic as you can, so that the information that you have actually is transmitted to the other person. I think it's very important to be aware who's responsible for what. Like if you look at, for example, Fridays for Future, Greta Thunberg, she is not responsible for solving the issue. She might be responsible for telling us, hey, there's something to do. But it's not her task, although some people are putting all their hopes on her. So I think it's very important to see who can actually be doing what. And that also has to do with age and with geographical location and with other things. I think it's about keeping the headlights on the road. So this is very difficult times that we face, and I think we can make to a good end or a good intermediate step, so to say, but we need to face it. So if you drive through the dark night on the road and you are turning off your headlights of your car, you will just hit a tree. But if you keep the headlights on, you might find your ways through the forest. But you need to face the challenge and to really live up to that, I think. And therefore, it's important to build resources and to actually be aware of what do I need to be functional, to be able to work. And therefore, for example, relational aspects are important. But also, and that connects to what Tony just said, it's about the knower that has, I think, to have the inner capacity to actually hold the tension and to be with it and to present what's going on. I think that's very important. And that, for me personally, for example, is something where meditation always be partial, but I think you can work so that you can encompass more complexity and also feelings. And I would try to pass that on by example. Yeah, thank you.
You are doing, Nico. Thanks a lot with this. Tony, please, you'll take.
On the whole, young people have not yet lost their intelligence. Providing they haven't been too much exposed to education and culture. Now that sounds rather upside down, but I was very struck with researchers some years back that came to the conclusion that the role of culture was to suppress our intelligence to about 10% of what it could be. So I believe that us old guys, you know, whether it's from 35 or 45 or 55 onwards, in my case it's unspeakable, even older than the incumbents in the American scene, is to provide arenas of hope to ourselves, be sufficiently deconditioned from the miasma of our current Horizon 1 culture, with its strong points and its aberrations, and create spaces in which we acknowledge that the native intelligence of upcoming generations is far better equipped to solve the, let's call it the Anthropocene for short, than we are. But they can't do it on their own. They need a certain kind of wisdom, which I do believe that there is a community of elders, even if it doesn't know itself, that can do this, so that we can be a support for that. And that's why I'm such a strong advocate of what my dad taught me. He was the head principal of a school, that education is about educare, about bringing out the potential. It's not really about knowledge. That's secondary. And so this idea of a university for the third horizon is one which turns knowledge upside down in that sense. It doesn't denigrate it, but it has a completely different role in the system. And that requires a lot of humility from the incumbents, and so it can't be separated from personal development. I mean, Nico mentioned meditation. Whatever can actually reduce our egos and increase our intelligence is to be encouraged. And I don't think higher education, in that sense, is about age and stage. It's about releasing this intelligence wherever it's trying to pop out. So I think I've forgotten his name now. An American senator put it quite well, that we have to be hospice carers for the old age and midwives for the new era.
Wonderful closing remarks, Tony. And with this, I want to thank you, our wonderful set of speakers today. And with this, we close the first session, and we go now into a coffee break. In 15 minutes, we reconvene. We're looking forward to see you back. Thank you, my friends from the thank you. 15 minutes break now. We will have to leave it there since it's recording. I cannot stop the recording from here, so we'll leave it here as a blank space for the break. Thank you, my friends. We'll be in touch for sure.
Recording
his
is
current
on.
research focuses on understanding patterns of mechanisms of equitable urban and regional development in Brazil, as well as the dynamics of supply chains in alternative and local food systems in US regions. Andrew, we are very pleased to have you with us and hand it over the microphone to you.
Thank you very much, Javier. And thank you for everyone who's joining us. This is my first opportunity to join a Knowledge City World Summit, and it's such a joy to be here with such a great group. I was really impressed and engaged by the first session and the conversation that came out of it. And so I'm looking forward to carrying things forward with the second session, where we are joined by Frank Weffering and Danielle Oriana. I'll do a brief introduction of each of them, and then I'll turn over the floor to Frank. After that, we'll hear from Danielle. This session that we're about to begin focuses on issues of urban development and cities in the era of the Anthropocene, and implications for the knowledge development paradigm and different paradigms of urban development as well. So today, one of the themes or topics that we'll be addressing, or that will, I think, come up in both of the presentations that we have to look forward to, is this issue of breaking boundaries and kind of paradigm shifts as well. We'll build on some of the conversations earlier about paradigm shifts in our ways of knowing, for example, as we talk about cities and the complex and very concrete, in both literal and figurative terms, dynamics of urbanization, urban development, and the everyday experience of cities. We'll be also talking about breaking boundaries in different fields of practice, urban development, the natural sciences, transportation planning and land use planning, how different professional fields and different fields of action are combining and recombining in new ways in response to the climate crisis. And we see this as well with the breaking of boundaries between scientific and academic disciplines, different ways of knowing. So I think one of the things I'm excited about with these presentations is kind of taking these abstract and very important macro ideas and bringing them down to the levels of cities and even specific projects that are transforming our cities, to see how how they're taking shape and becoming real already in the world around us. So with that, I'm going to introduce Frank Weffering. Frank holds a German diploma degree in economics from the Westfälische Wilhelms-Universität Münster, and has a Master of Economics from North Carolina State University. Mr. Weffering is a consultant with more than development research and implementation, and he specializes in the application of sustainability principles to transportation and urban mobility projects. So he is the first director of sustainability at Greenman Pedersen Incorporated, which is a New York-based engineering consulting firm. Long Island in New York with his wife and two sons, and is an avid swimmer, hiker, and online chess player. So
I'm not a very good chess player, so thoroughly enjoy it. So let me share my screen. I hope you see now. Stop if you do. You see a green screen? Okay, perfect. So yes, it's also actually my first time being exposed to the Knowledge Cities World Summit, so excited to be here. Joined the first session, was interesting. Learned a lot. I have to look into it again. It was very philosophical at times for me. So I'm trying to, and I was asked to present on transportation. So that's my specialty, transportation. And so you see it on the screen, transforming transportation and new ways of planning for the sustainable city. So I'm going to present a few concepts, one from Europe, one from the US particular, on how we can change the way we plan and make lives for all of us in the cities. Trying to give some, bridge the gap from theory to practice a little bit. But before I go into this, just a few words on my personal context. So as Andy said, I work for Greenman Peterson, GPI. That's our slogan is many talents, one firm, and I actually think this fits quite well to what we talk about here when we talk about multidisciplinary and working together, cooperating across boundaries, like Andy just said. So that's what we do. We do pretty much everything transport in this company. So from transport engineering to transport design, planning, we do also construction management, and inspection in New York City and other areas. So I'm the first director of sustainability at the company. So I'm bringing in this, I think people know, but I'm bringing in this balance of economic, social, environmental aspects to transportation, especially when it refers to safety, affordability, accessibility, resiliency, and also the climate change impact. So that's what I'm bringing in. Another slide here, I think. So this is another electoral map. It's all turned blue. I'm just kidding. It is blue, but it's just our office location. So you see where we are, mainly the east coast of the United States, and the little star, I hope you see it on the screen. That's where I'm talking from. That's Babylon and Long Island, just east of New York City. The company is over 50 years old, 100% employee owned, which is unique and good thing, and over 1,500 employees across all these locations. So let me jump into the topic really. Urban transportation. You see what I have on the screen there. It's important, obviously, to keep people moving and goods moving. That's what we do, right? We transport people and goods. When we do so, we do it a lot. That's kind of like an indicator of how the economy is going. When we talk about mobility, on the other hand, that's the difference between transportation and mobility. We're talking more about access to jobs, education, healthcare, community, services, like going to the park, meeting people, that sort of thing. So that's what transportation and mobility is about. And I have to say, working in this now for 20 years, trying to change people's behavior to be more sustainable. Some people say
Recording is on.
The level of congestion is actually a good indicator of how the economy is going. True. Yet, it is not what we want. We want to avoid congestion. We want to move vehicles. Not just congestion, but the sheer amount of cars and automobiles driving. They cause emissions. You all know this, contributing to climate change. This is linked to poor air quality, noise. Also, the way we have set up our transportation systems today, people become inactive, which causes follow-up problems. People get obese, they don't move enough, and they actually get sick. I don't go into this a little more. Road safety is an issue. People are being killed and severely injured to extents that are incredible. I'll also talk about that. And now, transportation inequity. We talk a lot about in society, in the US at least, about this year, about equity and addressing justices. There are a lot of injustices just related to not getting the opportunity because of lack of transportation to participate in society the way they should. So that being said, I named this slide Unsustainable Development, and going through some of these bullets here quickly. The congestion, so some institute in 2013 tried to come up with a monetary value of congestion, what it costs us. So you see there 124 billion per year in direct and indirect losses. So the direct losses is for wasted time in traffic. The indirect time and fuel, actually, loss in traffic, consumed in traffic. And the indirect ones are those that are being put forward to the consumer. You know, get that, they could be delivered later, and so those costs all amount to 124 billion per year. Doesn't mean much, but if you put it down, this is a US figure, that actually means $1 per person per day. You may know that transportation, since 3 years ago, has become the dominant contributing sector to climate change in the US. CO2 emissions, obviously very important. I mentioned the air pollution concentrations in the city. A particular problem when we talk about arteries, is 50 to 120% higher on urban materials than local roads. I mentioned this before, people are not moving, physically inactive. That is associated with huge amounts of cost in healthcare, and it also contributes to premature deaths. So people were more active, and I'm sorry, I have to provide a lot of US examples, but 31 million Americans over the age of 50 don't get the physical activity. They're not active at all beyond their daily, what they do, and just to live, basically. They don't do any extra activity. And that's a lot related to transport and how we set up the transportation. So several, when I say premature deaths, a lot of cancer-related illnesses and heart disease and diabetes are related to that and contribute to it. Last point I want to mention here, the annual road traffic deaths have reached 1.3 million. So that can 22%, to be precise. And in some countries, it's up to 6. Moving to the next slide here. So a lot of this can be traced back to the overemphasis and planning on the automobile. We have done so for decades. You know, when talking about the Anthropocene, starting possibly with after the Second World War. For sure, we can see that at that time the overemphasis on the automobile. So I try to find a picture from Mexico here because I know co-organized by Mexico, but this is maybe not very favorable one, but still I like the Beatles there. Unfortunately, they're in a traffic jam. So happens, you know, this is daily life all over the world. And I said for the last decades, this is actually what's happening today. So we're not out of the woods here. An Economist article from just a few weeks ago featuring what Cairo is doing, or Egypt, I should say. They're building expressways like you haven't seen before through Cairo. So this is amazing considering the things we know about car traffic and accommodating the car, and still seeing this kind of behavior. So while we have planned a lot for the automobile, this is the mode hierarchy that we're trying to achieve when we talk about sustainability. So it's an inverted pyramid here. You have the automobile, the single occupant vehicle on the bottom, and you increase the degree of sustainability, the more you come to the more active modes of transportation. And those are actually transit. And it is included in active transportation because people have to walk or cycle or be active to get to transport typically. And then the more obvious ones like cycling and walking. So we're trying to invert this pyramid and put a focus on developing the transport system in a way that is multimodal, addresses the balanced development of all. So this is what we see here. Now let me talk about some concepts. I'm mentioning 5 here, but I'm going into detail of 2. The ones that I'm not going to talk about, that I'll be happy to answer questions about, is healthy streets from London, a very interesting concept where the city of London really is trying to push active transportation and emphasizes the health. So this is a health-driven approach. Vision Zero, that's from Sweden, you may have heard of that, has the goal to reduce traffic fatalities, road fatalities to 0. It has made its way around the world in various forms, adapted. That's a very important one when we talk about safety. And I put the bottom one up, pedestrians first. That's from the International Transportation and Development Policy Institute, ITDP. They just came out with this publication. I think it's actually, on pedestrians first, walkability, and how to measure walkability and so forth. So that's something to look into if you're really interested in this transforming transportation field. Let me talk, however, now about sustainable mobility. This is something I've worked on in Europe, actually coordinating the development of this concept.
Recording is
The
on.
interesting thing about this concept is that it, after publication of the first guidelines, became European policy. So it was part of the urban mobility package in 2013 already. Gives it a lot of push for municipalities to actually develop such a plan and implement it eventually. And another good point I would like to stress here is that the EU institutions and as well as multilateral banks are linking the existence of the good quality sustainable urban mobility plan, or SUMP sometimes called, to funding for transportation infrastructure. So this gives you the incentive to really develop these groundbreaking new plans. And they have been taken up all over Europe and actually internationally as well. So Andy mentioned and Javier before, paradigm shift. So this is the paradigm shift in urban mobility planning. I hope you can see it, but you have on the left side the traditional transportation planning concept, and on the right side the SUMP planning. So we're shifting from the focus on traffic and on traffic flow capacity to a focus on people and their accessibility to services and functions that a city offers. And we're actually also shifting to their quality of life, there, including social equity, health, environmental quality, and so forth. I mentioned a few other things, balanced development of transportation modes, while of course before we were more focused on the car. Integration also, I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but we are talking about the functional urban area. So we're looking beyond the boundaries of the city. You know, the boundary of a city is artificial. We need to look at where people live. They live in the larger region, in the metropolitan area. So that these plans take into account the larger area and how people commute and interact city and to the outskirts. And it has a strong monitoring and evaluation component, which I would summarize as accountability. We have to be really honest in what we do. We have to coming up with new indicators in this concept, which are quality of life based. So we're actually asking people, how do you feel about certain things, and then report on how the progress is done. So this is part of. I don't have to go into detail here, but these are the 8 principles. I think I mentioned most of them. It's a bottom-up approach. So community engagement, stakeholder engagement is crucial to gain the buy-in and the support to eventually implement all these great things that we formulated. And no presentation on SUMP can do without this circle. Don't have to read all this, but what I'm trying to say here is that municipalities who want to implement this, they can go step by step and strong guidance on how to do things. Nothing is, always chronological. That's not how the world works. So, but you can pick your most important steps here. The guideline, the new ones include 62 new city examples. You can see what you relate to mostly, and they have translated in several languages throughout the world.
Recording is on.
You see them there, and they have ambitious ones like no traffic fatalities by 2030. restricting car usage in the city center, reducing the speed limit downtown to 30 kilometers per hour, which is 20 miles per hour by next year already, expanding the pedestrian zones and so forth. So this has to be implemented, and it is being implemented as we speak. And you find several, I mean, loads and loads of examples. Actually also worldwide. So I'm featuring here, I'm showing you Sustainable Development Goals. Transport does not have one, which is still strange to me, but it relates to the ones highlighted there, including good health and well-being and sustainable cities and communities, 3 and 11. And the climate change is driving the development for the development agencies, like the German one and the French one. So what you see on the right, Mobilize Your City, that's the initiative of these 2 international development agencies from France and Germany, focusing on SUMP development and education. Also, the United Nations Development Program has adopted this concept, trying to implement it in Eastern Europe, and so does the EU in South America and again in this. I'm moving across the pond to the United States. So people living here, they probably have heard of complete streets. This is it's not really a new concept. It's our approach, transportation and policy design approach that was coined already in 2000, but it's still innovative to an extent because municipalities, small to the largest ones, are implementing this more and more. I think the snowball has really picked up, and we see more and more of these complete streets developments. And what I mean by that is planning and designing streets that are safe for people of all ages and abilities and balance the needs of different transportation modes. So all ages and abilities, sometimes we hear things like cities for an 8-year-old all the way to an 80-year-old. This is really what it's about. All abilities, so whether you're mobility impaired or if you're mobility impaired, you should still be able to, enjoy the street and use all it can offer. So this is what this focus is about. It's very much context sensitive. It actually developed from an approach that was called context sensitive solutions. So clearly there's a big difference whether you are in the countryside or suburbs or in the intercity, in a city. So the solutions are, they differ in terms of street design, what you try to implement here. This is very important to keep the context. And this is a famous slide here. So just showing you that this is not all about the car. In the US, it is many times just about the car. We don't see bike lanes, especially not dedicated, protected bike lanes. You see sidewalks in some places, but not consistently. That's actually also an equity issue. And 90% of high-income communities, you have sidewalks.
Recording is
I don't
on.
think this was really called a complete street, but this is Times Square. But it is the transformation, right? We got rid of the cars. It's blocked. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like this at the moment, of course, but you get the picture. It was the space was reallocated to people. Traffic was diverted, so created this beautiful and enjoyable place in the center of the city. Here are some examples. You see a dedicated bike lane. It's not ideally protected. This is an example from Brooklyn. Here you want to have separation, physical separation from the car lanes to the bicycle, for example. But you see the green infrastructure I mentioned in the middle, so greenery there. Just a nice example. Here's an example from Toronto. Actually, you see a little bit of art there too, placemaking. I don't want to go into detail there, but there's a lot, where we can integrate artistic expressions with street design. And I think this example from Toronto was evolved from a pilot project, a temporary one where people painted the street and maybe put some temporary barriers in, to a permanent one, and has become a vibrant place and human-centric street that was envisioned. I want to show you this one too. This is a very small place here on Long Island. It's a village. You see the main street there. It's such a wide road that cars tend to speed, drivers tend to speed. And this particular location actually saw a fatality, so there was an urgency to do something about it. And one way we do this is through engineering and street design solutions, so bringing in the sidewalk into the street. So the crossing distance is shortened. You have, again, green infrastructure there. And you have warning signs when a pedestrian is trying to cross. This has just started 3 weeks ago. The plan was put in place, a walkability plan, and funding all of a sudden poured in to implement this. So these are the little successes that keep us going. And I think, I don't know, but make things safer and perhaps save lives. Coming to the end here, in my view, the drivers of change in transportation and urban mobility, it really comes down to this change and switching the attention from the car to the people and quality of life. So this is supported by thorough public engagement. All our projects are driven by community engagement activities. We're coming up with solutions now to do this online. We can't do without it, and we have to get the people on board, hear what the problem is, get their voice in developing solutions. Then you get the buy-in. We don't have that. Like the example I showed you on Long Island, we're car dominated here. It's so many cars. And there was opposition. Why do you want to do a walkability study? But that has
Recording is on.
But I think others are more important. And in terms of complete streets, it's actually economic development. So we have to do, I think we have to do a better job in communicating how beneficial this this transformation of transportation is to people's wallets, businesses' wallets, and so forth. We have not done enough. Otherwise, we would get much more support. There is evidence for it, no doubt, but we have to do a better job. And the same is true for climate change. We need to, if we want to really make a change, we need to do a better job communicating the benefits of doing it. Thank you. So, I'm coming to an end here. Planning across disciplines and professions. That's key. So that's why I'm so curious to be on this panel and this summit. We're talking across disciplines, and I hope I get and you get an idea. You heard something maybe they haven't heard before, or the same from others. So with that, I'm finishing my talk. This is my contact information. But I'll put this slide up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. That was really fantastic and a really nice illustration as well of these themes and the issue of breaking boundaries and some of the practical and concrete issues that come into that. Paradigm shift in our transportation and mobility systems that's certainly connected to the problems created, the various environmental, social, economic problems created by a fossil fuel driven transportation system. I'm calling in from Detroit, which has done probably more than any other city to diffuse that fossil fuel driven transportation system across the world. But what it actually takes to redesign and replan our cities in ways that move beyond that or do it in different ways requires engineers, planners, increasingly landscape architects, people who are able to design new IT and digital systems to help to manage the mobility system and different design approaches that kind of resonate with the local culture and needs and demands and the ways that actual communities in that place use the infrastructure and the space. And so this, it was really clear just how broad-reaching this change in thinking is at the level of mobility planning. I want to turn now to Daniel's presentation so that he has plenty of time to share his material, and then we can gather comments and questions from the audience as well. I made a note that if any questions or thoughts come to you over the course of the presentations, please leave a note in the comment or the chat box, and we'll return to it at the end of the session. There will also be time for a broader chat, and so we can all turn off our cameras and talk together when Danielle finishes. But I want to briefly introduce Danielle. Danielle Oriana is a principal professor at the University of Cuenca in Ecuador, and he is a co-founder of the YACTA Lab, Sustainable Cities Research Group.
Recording is on.
I hope my sound is clear and you can see my screen. So good morning, everyone, and thank you, Andrew, for the introduction. I'm Daniel Orellana from the University of Cuenca in Ecuador. I'm really glad to be here, and I want to thank the organizers for this fantastic opportunity to share with this community some ideas on the city's resilience and how can we adapt our communities for climate change and other challenges of the 21st century. As Andrew said, I am an environmental biologist by training, and during the last 14 years, I've been focused on studying the spatial behavior and ecology of one specific species, that's the Homo sapiens, and its home range environment, that's the city. So today I will borrow some concepts from ecology, complexity science, and socio-ecological systems to explain why we need a new approach to study and manage the cities. First of all, our coordinates, the Yacta Lab Sustainable Cities, is a research group at the University of Cuenca in Ecuador. We are part of interdisciplinary departments of the space and population, and our mission is to produce scientific evidence to support cities to face the challenges of the 21st century. We are based in Cuenca. Cuenca is an intermediate city of about 600,000 inhabitants, and it's settled in a valley on the southern Andes of Ecuador. The city is part of the UNESCO World Heritage List, and I have to say that unlike several intermediate cities in the region, it has a high coverage of essential services and a relatively high standard of quality of life. And nevertheless, Cuenca also displays several of the prevalent problems that other intermediate cities in the region are facing in the last 2 decades. For example, uncontrolled urban sprawl, rampant mobility problems, aggressive use of resources and energy, increasing inequality across the population, and a declining sense of community and public participation. In fact, our research framework identifies several challenges that most of the intermediate cities in the region will face during the next decades, including urban sprawl, climate change, resource and energy depletion, socioeconomical inequality, health and well-being, information and knowledge management. But all these challenges are crossed by several domains that require understanding, research, and planning, such as the built environment, the urban morphology, the culture, the urban life, and the participation of the people, the mobility and other urban systems, the ecology and the metabolism of the city, among several others. And all these concepts need to be interconnected for a better understanding. So, although this framework might sound complicated, it's not. It's complex, but it's not complicated. The problem arises because we are used to think about the city as a fixed stage where we perform our lives. It's just like, hard infrastructures. And this perspective undermines the force to promote the necessary change to face the challenges I mentioned before. But the city is better understood as an interconnected system, where physical structures strongly determine the way we live, and our way of life
Recording is on.
At the individual level, they seem to be very difficult to implement and usually fail. And it's because we are operating at the wrong level. This socio-ecological system paradigm is strongly based on the theory of complex adaptive systems. Both kinds of systems exhibit common characteristics such as path dependency and history, non-linearity and feedback loops, emergent properties, distributed governance, adaptability, and self-organization. And all these characteristics are prevalent in cities and can be understood and managed using the approaches from socio-ecological systems. I want to talk about one of these approaches that is called the adaptive cycle. This approach has been developed during the last 20 years in the complex theory research, mainly by people from the Resilience Alliance, Boshalling, and others. The adaptive cycle is a theoretical and pragmatical device that allows us to analyze and understand how socio-ecological systems evolves over time, transitioning between different phases that determine its connectedness levels, the potential to use external resources, and its resilience toward external disturbance. So you can see how this starts to be relevant for the cities. We can recognize four main phases of the adaptive cycle, which I will explain using a very simplified example related to mobility in the city. The first phase is where exploitation starts, and the system uses external resources to grow. In this phase, that is usually denoted by an R letter, usually a set of dominant approach become prevalent, and the investment focuses on the strengths and opportunities that have been demonstrated effective. There are usually low levels of internal conflicts and broad agreements, and resilience also tends to increase. In our example of mobility, for example, we can relate this phase to when a city, a specific modality of transportation, such as private motorized vehicles, start to dominate because of its relative advantages. So most of people agree that cars are useful, and there is little discussion about the investments focused on enhancing the streets and organize the traffic. But this phase doesn't last for too long and rapidly transitions into a conservation phase, here denoted with a K letter. So in this phase is dominated by positive feedback loops that reinforce the accumulation of resources. While benefits still surpass the cost, the negative impacts and side effects start to become prevalent. And here the maintenance costs are very high and inequality increases. Also, as a consequence, the conflict grows. And as a last consequence, the resilience of the system starts to shrink at dangerous levels. So in our mobility example, this is the phase when a city invests a lot of resources on enhancing the streets, networks, improving traffic control, issuing regulations and very complex rules for traffic, and leads to other parts of the system unattended, like active mobility, public
Recording is on.
Has the lowest level of resilience and the risk of collapse peaks. several cities have fallen in this rigidity trap regarding mobility. When massive investments during the last decades into care-oriented infrastructure, as Frank was mentioning before, attempt to improve mobility by enhancing the levels of services, broadening the streets, etc. But the results were counterproductive due to this effect that it's called the induced demands, generating even more traffic and increasing the travel time for motorized vehicles. And at the same time, other modalities such as public transit or active mobility usually are referred as alternative mobility and are giving minimal resources. And this is usually just a kind of greenwashing strategy, as some people call it. Either the system falls into the trap or not, this is a critical tipping point where the paths of the system might diverge. In any case, the system will enter into a release phase, which can be either be planned or managed or very disorganized, implying even a collapse of the system. In this phase, the old structures break down and the dominant paradigms are not longer valid. The accumulated resources are released, and as a consequence, new opportunities arise. Here is when the innovative visions, which once were dismissed as utopic, these visions become useful and carry a wide range of solutions and ideas. And also here is when the previous experiments and pilots revealed to be useful. I think actually the pandemic represents an instance of this release phase regarding mobility. During the lockdown, several cities around the world implemented these tight restrictions on motorized traffic. Some of these restrictions were just unthinkable just weeks before that. So watching the empty streets, we realized how much space we devoted to cars. And this space was much needed for physical distance. And in only very few weeks, walking and cycling became the primary mode of mobility in several cities, at least for a time. And thousands of people also realized how much enjoyable and healthy active mobility is. What happens after that is the transition to a reorganization phase. Here it's marked with an alpha Greek letter. Here the experimentation declines and the new priorities are established. Therefore, new drivers emerge here in the system, increasing the diversity and resilience. But at this phase, the system capacity to reach and use new resources is deficient. And the second trap arises, that's the poverty trap. In this trap, the system is unable to align the objects and actions. And there is a lot of negative feedback loops preventing the synergy between the different approaches and different ideas. So this is also a very dangerous trap. So in this part, enhancing participation in decision making is critical to build shared visions and set common goals. So and it's also critical to use the knowledge derived from past phases to avoid repeated mistakes, to make the same mistakes again. But if this phase is adequately managed, the system can transition into a cycle with
Recording is on.
Of open public spaces and active mobility. So here we are closing the cycle and entering again in the exploitation and growth phase. I think it's essential to highlight that the adaptive cycle doesn't imply a strongly determined and ordered transition between all these phases I mentioned. It's just a simplification, and there might be jumps forward and back. But the general structure of the cycle has been demonstrated valid for an enormous variety of systems, such as forests, farms, protected areas, fisheries, stocks, mining, you name it. So this approach, it's really useful for managing these coupled socio-ecological systems. So how to use it? You may be wondering now. In other words, can we really apply the adaptive cycle in practice? Well, in fact, yes, of course. And there are several strategies to use the adaptive cycle as a practical device for adaptive management. I just want to highlight some very important parts of it. One of the things is to identify the phase of the system you are dealing with. For example, is the system growing in potential and connections? Is the resilience increasing? Are obstacles of trumps in the immediate future? So each phase has different opportunities that can be seized and traps that must be avoided. For example, in the conservation phase, where a lot of resources are being invested, is the best opportunity for experimentation. Even if those experiments seems to be utopic or not really useful at the larger scale. But in some point in the future, they will prove to be useful. Also, of course, trying to avoid these traps that are that lay in the different phases. I think it's also important to connect the different temporal and spatial scales. So there is not just one cycle. The thing becomes even more complex when you broaden your perspective, both in space and time, and you will see a hierarchy of these adaptive cycles. That is something that is called the panarchy in the socio-ecological system literature. So the importance of this is that you can connect these different scales and learn from the past. So when you become, you develop skills in your system to analyze the adaptive cycle and learn from the past, it will be also be easier to plan for future transitions. You can find a lot of instances and recommendations for practice. I just want to suggest some of them. This book, Principles for Building Resilience by Biggs, Curator, and Michael Schoon, it's fantastic, and they propose 7 very clear principles for building resilience. And you will recognize a lot of these ideas put in practice actually in the previous presentation by Frank. There are also other papers that you will find interesting. Some months ago, we
Recording is on.
Thank you, Danielle. That was really fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, and I can see a lot of connections between the adaptive cycle that you explained clearly and all sorts of systems that planners and urban professionals work on. And you know, the history of American cities, I think, bears out the patterns that you described very clearly in my mind. So I want to thank you for helping to clarify my thinking about all that. That was a really great presentation. With now that the speakers are finished presenting, I want to invite people to submit questions into the chat box. I'll start with one question, and then I see Javier has a question, and we'll just open things up. My question, it kind of draws on an insight from the first panel today, a comment from Ioan, who I don't think he's here at the moment, but he, you know, he reflected on how, you know, different ways of knowing become institutionalized in different ways, and he called for a way of, you know, institutionalizing wisdom, or at least different kinds of knowledge or ways of valuing. I was wondering if each of you could speak in terms of some of the challenges that you faced in terms of institutionalizing these ways of thinking, in terms of either technical challenge or perhaps even political or social resistance to making our cities work in different ways. So I'll invite you to remark on any challenges in that area, and also ways that you've overcome them.
Who will start? Frank, do you want to start?
Go ahead. You go ahead, Dan.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's not easy, of course. We are very used to this very linear and disciplinary focused way of thinking, even at the universities and the schools that are supposed to be the, you know, the innovative institutions of the 21st century, but our universities usually still work with the same paradigms that 2 centuries ago. So it's not easy. Actually, in our case, for example, to put together this idea of an interdisciplinary department that is not inside one specific school or department has been a very difficult challenge. That's at the institutional level of the city, and that's relates very well with this rigidity trap I mentioned before. And when you extrapolate this to the city, will happen the same. We've been working in mobility during the last 10 years here in the city, and during the first meetings we had with the local authorities 10 years ago, when we start talking about, you know, walkability or cycling, they referred us to the sports department because they said we are a mobility department. What walkability and bikes have to do? Knowledge that you accumulated become suddenly extremely relevant. So for cities as Cuenca, that are very small city in Ecuador, these lessons demonstrate to be very useful for other cities in the region as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. That was interesting.
Yeah,
Frank, do you have any?
Yeah, just to chime in, I'm fascinated by this infinite loop there that you put up, Daniel. I'm just, you know, working in this field, some cities, some municipalities are further ahead than others. So if you like, they're further along in the group, and or even in different phases. And I'm still struck why we have such difficulty learning from good examples that have provided evidence already in the care context, and we're not able to transfer this the way it should really happen to the context that is lagging behind. So I guess it comes down to knowledge. It comes also down to, I guess, human behavior and not believing things can happen where you are. You know, when I coming from Europe, these mobility solutions perhaps being a few years ahead. Some may not, but let's just say generalized that acceptable assumption. You can talk about this here, but until people see it here in the US, for example, they don't believe it. You know, you have to have the seeing is believing thing, not like telling somebody telling you about it. So I'm struck by that, and I'm wondering how we can act that. So I think it's all about evidence and making the evidence clear and relatable to people. And well, the other thing I wanted to mention is, I mentioned in my presentation, but we have to come from different angles, and I'm fascinated by how now transportation planners are talking to health professionals. This is just a big opportunity here, especially when we talk about active transport, addressing all these health challenges that we to be like street design solutions. So that's pretty amazing. That's the thing that we need to foster.
Great. Thank you, Frank. I'm going to turn to Javier's question, and then Blanca has a couple of questions as well that we'll turn to after that. Javier, he asks, what is your perspective on climate change and the economic culture? Javier, if you'd like to unmute your microphone and expand on that at all, I welcome you to. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the speakers. Again, this question was about your thoughts on, and your perspective on climate change and the economic culture.
Well, I think it's already quite a big question, so I wouldn't need to expand it. So just to have a first reaction to it.
So what is the question?
The question is, it's in the chat box.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on climate change and the economic culture?
I'm not sure what economic culture applies, but perspective on climate change is it's a driving force to some extent when you talk about urban mobility change and things we do. But what I try to explain is like I don't think it's the predominant driving force. The smaller scale you look at neighborhoods, the more irrelevant it gets. Economics. I had the slide up. You know, the globe. So difference between short term and long term. In the long run, we're hurting ourselves just relying on it too much, and to show that there are alternatives. That is the challenge. And
Recording is on.
You know, what is really the value of better air? you can put a value on saving a life, but that is, you know, best you can talk about ranges and so on. So we improve, and in that aspect, I think we'll well. So I'm involved in what's called Envision, sustainable infrastructure. That is new. You're building infrastructure with sustainability in mind, and you're actually looking at these intangibles, try to account for them properly. So just the flaw in the system, and economists are asked too to do a better job. Not that they're not trying. I mean, I studied this 30 years ago, to be honest. Still haven't got it.
I'm getting the 2-minute warning. So Danielle, I'll kick it over to you if you have any brief thoughts, and then I guess we'll have to unfortunately close things and end the session. But
we don't have time on.
Yeah, no problem. Very quickly, and I think that's where the approach of the adaptive cycle it's useful. So for me, climate change is actually an emergent property of the system. You know, it's something that happens as a result of interlinked interaction between a lot of things. Economy being, of course, a driving force here. And as several emergent properties of the systems are very difficult to change. You can change the property. You must change on the functions of the system, and how the system is interlinked, and how these properties are emerging from it. So what I mean here is that there is not just one straight answer to that, and that we need to work in several fronts to face this existential challenge. I would say, and also this is also related what we call the slow variables, that are variables that you start to see the change only long after you implemented your policies, strategies, and plans. So, for example, you have heard from the International Panel of Climate Change that if we stop just now greenhouse emissions, we will see the effects just in 10 or 15 years. So we can't start to monitor the results just now. So that's the importance of seeing the perspective of the different cycles. And here, climate change will represent this rigidity trap, and depends on us now how we are going to transition out of it in an orderly, managed way, or just, you know, disorganized collapse. That's up to us, I have to say.
I want to recognize that we're at time now. However, we won't be cut off. There's one more question from thank you so much. Blanca asked, Frank, your question will be about whether you think that we're really moving on as humans into a sustainable global culture. So first, Danielle, I'll ask you to respond to this question about resource management and the resilience framework and how that plays in.
Thank you, Blanca. In fact, sorry to repeat myself, but I have to say I can also see knowledge as an emergent property of a system, you know, and unlike several approaches, say, for example, when they talk about smart cities or knowledge cities, just as a cities, you know, crowded with sensors and stuff and transmitting data, and so I don't think so. I think knowledge is the result of the patterns that emerge from information. And in terms that this information is shared broadly across the space and time scales of the system, that could be translated into actionable knowledge. Okay, so if you see information as a resource, and if you remember from the adaptive cycle that the cycle presents also a dimension of potential to use resources for a transition in between the phases, this is where learning comes. So you can just, be pushed by the inertia of the system towards the next phase, or you can capitalize this knowledge, to make an orderly transition and bring the system to a higher level of resilience. Transportation, again, and mobility, I think is one of the best examples of that. For example, during the last years, we have presented electrical cars and autonomous vehicles as the panacea and the future of mobility. I don't think so. I don't think they represent just one more force towards the same system that we have built during the last 2 decades. We need to scale from that, and we need to be very clear on that to our decision makers and for the policies on our cities. That's not the way the stage or the phase we want to transition to. So if we are going to learn from our past cycles and our past mistakes, it's very easy to see the reasons why this is not true.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. And maybe in some ways that segues to the question that Blanca poses to Frank. Do you think that we're really moving on as humans into a sustainable global culture with respect to mobility and transportation?
Yeah, I saw that question out there for 3-4 minutes. I'm still thinking about it. I think we cannot afford to be, we have to be optimistic. And I see that we are moving, and now we're getting into semantics, not into a global culture, but towards one. I see the change. There's a lot going on. If I just talk about my field, how many municipalities are trying to do things on a street level, on a neighborhood level, city level, on a regional level. It generally, I would say, goes in the right direction. There are exceptions, and I have put this example from Cairo up. Much detail there, but building expressways to city nowadays, 6-7 lanes, that's just not what we do anymore. So we have to do a better job. I see the change. And, just keep working on it. It's just, otherwise we'll pay for it. I don't know if that answers your question. Yes, we're moving in the right direction, but we need to speed up.
And Danielle for these excellent presentations and really getting our brains going. I think for me, reflecting on the broader theme of the barriers that have long defined how we think and design our cities. Knowledge for the
Recording is
but
on.
At the same time, the details matter. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you all throughout the week. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Andrew, and to all our speakers, and see you tomorrow, same time. You may find the link for tomorrow in the program. Well, I mean, that would be for YouTube. For the speakers for tomorrow's session and everyone participating at Bluetooth, you have the connection available. Right? See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Frank, really nice to meet you. Hope we will have another opportunity to discuss. I see a lot of alignments between our visions.
Wonderful, Daniel.
Let's be optimistic to meet in person someday.
Yes, Frank.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Ana Cristina, for setting up this session. Bye, everyone. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
Recording has stopped.